In 1838, the Senecas were remorseful and resentful at being taken advantage of in the infamous Buffalo Creek Treaty, which purported to deprive the Seneca of their land in New York State and force them out of the state. A delegation of Senecas visited the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House asking for help. They knew that if anyone would help them, the Quakers would, and they were right. Farmington and Philadelphia Quakers launched an intensive public relations and lobbying campaign and succeeded in overturning that treaty. That is why the Senecas were not ousted on a trail of tears in the 1840s and have been able to remain in New York State through today. This campaign on behalf of the Senecas was extensively documented at the time in minutes and notes, now maintained in the Quaker collection at Swarthmore College. Copies of these papers have been made and placed on deposit at the Canandaigua State Historic Site in Victor. The landmark building that hosted all this important dialogue was almost completely neglected in recent years and was headed for imminent collapse if it were not torn down first. That almost happened. In 2004, when I was clerk of today's Farmington meeting, Douglas Fisher came to me to see what we could do to save this important building, and we set to work. It was a daunting task that very few thought could succeed, but our effort accelerated, even despite a windstorm blowing off a full wall. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have since been raised by a very active committee, and the new Farmington Quaker Crossroads Historic District has been created on the National Register of Historic Places. On November the 9th, 2011, the stabilized 1816 building was moved 1,600 feet to its new permanent location on Sheldon Road in Farmington, where it will be restored to its period of significance in the 1830s and 1840s. Peter Jemison gave a Seneca blessing at our ceremony that day in celebration of the completion of the building's move as an echo of his Seneca Nation ancestors speaking there 170 years ago. Had Douglas Fisher and I not acted 8 years ago to save this important building, it would not exist today. Now we can depict in the 21st century all the American history that happened within its original four walls back in the early 19th century. With our extensive documentation, future visitors will be able to hear the authentic words spoken by Frederick Douglass within the very walls where they were once uttered by him. Speeches of early suffragettes will be read within the very walls where they once resounded, and the words of the 1840s Senecas will be heard there in the 21st century as modern visitors seek to understand the issues confronting Native Americans in New York 150 years ago. We have a website at www.farmingtonmeetinghouse.org where everyone can monitor the progress of this most worthy project. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Hill, for giving us that update on the meeting house and for reminding us of that long history. I've been neglectful of mentioning those that are here with us today, and I want to mention Chief Stuart Patterson, who is here from the Tuscarora Nation, Chief Leo Henry, who is also here from the Tuscarora Nation, Chief Sam George, who is here, and then also Chief Stuart Jameson, as well as Chief Darwin Hill, that are here with us from the Tonawanda Band of Seneca people. And I want to thank them for coming and joining us today. And one other thing I would like to do is, one of those people who was very instrumental in maintaining this commemoration over many years was a man named J. Sheldon Fisher. Fisher was very instrumental in protecting and getting people interested in the preservation of Canandaigua. He first went to the National Park Service, and then he turned to the New York State Parks, and he convinced them to preserve Canandaigua as a historic site, as a site of a 17th century Seneca town. His son Doug has been carrying on some of those works and is also carrying on that responsibility of reading the preamble to this treaty. And so I'm going to ask Doug if he would share with us the preamble to the Canandaigua Treaty.
Thank you very much, Peter. I always appreciate hearing good words about my father. And I remember back in the 1970s when my father and the city historian for Canandaigua and I were the only three people here because it was in the 20 degrees and a blizzard and freezing ice rain. And today is perhaps the finest weather we've ever had. And I'm so pleased that so many of you are able to be here today. I want to read just briefly a letter from one of the New York State representatives, governor's representative to the discussions on many issues with the Senecas, and that is Lieutenant Governor Robert Duffy. Says, "To my friends gathered in Canandaigua on Treaty Day, Canandaigua was the chosen spot 218 years ago for Native Americans to join with representatives of the new United States government to establish a permanent friendship between the peoples. Governor Cuomo has appointed me to continue this friendship between our peoples, and I am grateful for the increased understanding that these discussions have given to me. I regret that official New York State business has taken me elsewhere in the state today, but I am pleased to give the greetings of Governor Andrew Cuomo and of the people of the state of New York to all attendants at Treaty Day, and particularly to my Native American friends. The great Seneca orator Red Jacket spoke eloquently that this 1794 treaty should brighten the chain of friendship between our peoples. In that spirit, I look forward to a continuing dialogue with the Native Americans and hope to be able to join all of you on a future Canandaigua Treaty Day. Robert J. Duffy, Lieutenant Governor, State of New York." Over at the Canandaigua Primary School, where the balance of today's program will be held, there's a book sale. I bought a book entitled The Founders of America. Many people looking at that title would think, oh, that relates to 1776. No, that relates to the Native American peoples who were here far earlier than 1776. And it was interesting hearing the president this week talk about a focus in the next term on immigration policy. Well, immigration policy was not being discussed really 500 years ago, or even in the 1600s, when the French were sending emissaries to this area. To Canandaigua, LaSalle came in 1669, and there appeared to be a friendship being established between the European peoples and the Native American peoples. And immigration policy was just kind of a dim concept at the time, until 325 years ago this summer, when the conflict in Europe between England and France boiled over into the French wanted the English out of the way, the Seneca were treating with the English, therefore get rid of the Seneca, and the Marquis de Denonville, the Governor General of Canada, was sent in to this area by King Louis XIV of France out of Versailles. And he targeted Canandaigua to wipe out Canandaigua. And he wiped out the physical Canandaigua, but 300 years later, 1987, Canandaigua came back much stronger than ever in terms of its being a place where everybody can come and learn about the Native American culture and everything associated with that. Peter Jemison has been heading up the Canandaigua State Historic Site all that time and has provided great leadership in establishing a new museum of Seneca history and culture, which will be having a groundbreaking foreseeably soon at the Canandaigua State Historic Site. So, bringing it forward, yes, there was the military clash between the would-be immigrants and the Native Americans, And as Peter recounted, it was certainly very significant during the American Revolution, where again, the Seneca, resenting what the French had done, sided with the British. And so President Washington sent General John Sullivan to right through where we're standing along Canandaigua Lake and elsewhere in this part of New York State to crush the power then of the Seneca simply because they were friendly with the British. Well, with the Treaty of Paris and with the soldiers from the Sullivan expedition wanting to return here, that couldn't happen if there were still going to be hostilities. And so the concept was, gotta have friendship and gotta work these issues out so that everybody can move forward on an amicable basis. And so this is what led up to the 1794 treaty, where President Washington designated one of his trusted associates, Timothy Pickering, to come here to Canandaigua to help work this out. The Pickering family has long resided in Salem, Massachusetts, and that's the area of the Wampanoag territory. And it's so wonderful to have a representative here today of the Wampanoag tribe, Wampanoag Nation, because as you might recall, 1621, when the Plymouth colony was settled, the Wampanoags were the people who taught those settlers how to survive in this cold wilderness. And the Wampanoags were guests of honor, if you will, at America's first Thanksgiving ceremony conducted by the Pilgrims at the Plymouth colony. So the concept, as I say, of the treaty was to establish peace and friendship going forward. And as was indicated, Red Jacket subsequently in his speech used the metaphor of brightening the chain of friendship. The President, reading from the treaty, the President of the United States, having determined to hold a conference with the Six Nations of Indians for the purpose of removing from their minds all causes of complaint, and I wish that had worked out, and establishing a firm and permanent friendship with them, and Timothy Pickering being appointed sole agent for that purpose, and the agent having met and conferred with the sachems and warriors of the Six Nations in general council. Now, in order to accomplish the good design of this conference, the parties have agreed on the following articles, which, when ratified by the President, with the advice and consent of the Senate of the United States, shall be binding on them and the Six Nations. Article 1, peace and friendship are hereby firmly established and shall be perpetual between the United States and the Six Nations. And as Peter pointed out, the U.S. Constitution of 1787 explicitly states that treaties shall be the supreme law of the land. So when this treaty says, and it's signed by both the Six Nations and by the United States government, if it says that peace and friendship are hereby firmly established and shall be perpetual between the United States and the Six Nations, that concept is the supreme law of the land. Over here you will see a precise size replica, precise coloration of this Canandaigua Treaty that was signed right here on this lawn. It wasn't a lawn then, but it was woods all around, but you get the idea. This is where it happened. And the signatories of all of the Six Nations, sachems, and other representatives, and the translators, Israel Chapin, and others representing the tribes, the intermediaries, and Timothy Pickering as agent on behalf of General George Washington. I would also point out a contemporary note here that we've all heard about the tragedy over at the Benghazi consulate in Libya, where our ambassador to Libya was killed and several of his associates. And there is a federal inquiry going into that today. The person designated by President Obama to investigate what happened is a former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, or to Russia, by the name of Thomas Pickering, who is a direct descendant of Timothy Pickering. So in this meeting that you're talking about between the president and the congressman and the Native Americans, perhaps Thomas Pickering could resurrect his ancestors' role and be a helpful intermediary here also. That would be very nice. So, in the spirit of perpetual friendship, I thank you again for attending today.
Thank you, Jeff. Word for our annual annuity cloth when it comes to us in Canandaigua NY. And Clayton has been trying to help me all day long to get that right. I might have gotten it right, I'm not positive. We're on the lands of the city of Canandaigua and the county of Ontario, and we have a couple of representatives from that area. And I'm going to call first one of the people that's been very helpful to us over the years in this commemoration, and that is the current mayor of the city of Canandaigua, Ellen Palomini. Ellen, would you come?
Thank you to everyone who's here today. November 11th is always a day that we can look forward to in the city of Canandaigua, because we know that we're going to have commemoration, of course, celebrate Veterans Day and salute the veterans, and many of whom are Native American. So I echo the sentiments in regard to both. But I want to take a moment today to talk about something that's going to happen next year, because knowing the history of this commemoration, I know you're going to be here. Yeah. So, the city of Canandaigua is going to be celebrating its 100th birthday in 2013. Prior to 1913, Canandaigua was a village, and it decided